Well, one day closer to the weekend, here we are on a Thursday and still dealing with some remarkably good weather. I've got to point out, we're looking for a lot of sunshine the next couple of days, really through the weekend and into the beginning of next week. The only difference is the temperature will cool off probably 10 to 15 degrees for daytime highs over a period of about 4 days. But otherwise, there's nothing really on the horizon that we've got to be worried about. 33, which is a little warmer than when we got started yesterday. We're above the freezing mark. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock on Top Story. News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Thank you for joining me, Bill Colley, this morning. A number of things we've got going on. Just to give you kind of a rundown of where we're going to start. Jobless claims came out this morning from last week. This is the count from last week, and they jumped above 300,000. So you may remember all of those weeks, we've been just seeing it seesaw back and forth, but all of those weeks where we've had people telling us, oh, the economy is turning around, and it's because of the brilliance of all of the Democrats in Washington. Okay, here we go again. Now what do you say? I mean, once again, we have evidence things are not getting better. Well, that's just an anomaly. Well, we had an anomaly a few weeks ago, and then an anomaly a few weeks before that. How many more anomalies do you have to see before you say, we've got a pattern going on? And the pattern is simply, we don't know. We don't know if things are actually getting a whole heck of a lot better or not. So, wanted to mention that. Also, coming up a little later in the show, Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game is going to spend some time with us, and he's going to answer some of your questions. We have, since the last time he was here, we talked a little bit about the possibility of fee increases for hunting and fishing licenses, and I thought, this is going to be a done deal, and this will pass and really move along quickly. But there's been some opposition in the state legislature, and perhaps he can enlighten us on just where that is going to be headed. And as I say, he'll be able to answer a lot of your questions, because as we move towards spring, different seasons coming about, you may have some questions about that as well. And another thing I wanted to mention off the top of the show this morning, Ken Menzel's going to join us in about half an hour or 20 minutes or so. In the meantime, a judge ruled yesterday, and I guess this is the final straw when it comes to broadband in Idaho schools. Well, you want to talk about a cluster. This comes from AP. A district judge says Idaho's troubled broadband contract is void, clarifying a ruling made in November. He voided the contract late last year after finding the state violated its own procurement laws. However, the state did appeal to determine if the entire contract was illegal or only portions that had been amended. The state has not paid its broadband contract vendors since September. Last week, legislators were informed that the vendors had submitted an ultimatum stating that unless they begin receiving payments for services, Idaho's broadband program will go dark February 22nd. So in other words, less than 2 weeks away. Actually, a week from this coming Sunday. So kids could go back to school on the 23rd. And it's not just the kids, it's going to be administration. Everything that going through the schools, we have become so dependent on this thing called the internet and what it provides for us. It's difficult to think about living without it. I was talking the other day about my parents and the fact we had no cell phones, no internet, no cable. We just didn't have those things around the home. Saved my parents a lot of money, I should note. But if you think about it, growing up, how did we get by without any of these things? I remember we got a microwave oven when I was in high school. I didn't know the difference between an Amana radar range, which was usually a prize on Truth or Consequences in the late 60s, and a microwave oven until somebody, I think in college, said, well, they're exactly the same thing. So they had been around since I was a kid, really little kid, but we didn't see one until I got into high school. I was also a teenager when we first got cable TV, 13 actually, so I was a young teenager. And what we got were 12 channels. You got 4 local channels, five, one being an independent, one being public TV, which we couldn't pick up with our regular old aerial because a couple of those were on UHF. Cable brought them into the house. And then cable simply duplicated some of the signals from another nearby city. So you could watch a newscast from a nearby city and hear names that weren't familiar, but you could also watch all of your favorite network shows on those channels. So you got CBS twice, ABC twice, NBC twice, a couple of UHF stations that showed a lot of Star Trek and Bonanza reruns. Not that those were bad. We watched a lot of Star Trek and Bonanza reruns. And then you had a couple of different public TV stations which had all the same programming except for the Begathons, which had different characters. And for good measure, they threw in a couple of Canadian TV stations. So we got to watch the Toronto Maple Leafs twice a week, which for me was great. Everybody else in the house didn't much care for it. They had to buy me a second TV because that's all. I didn't care about Laverne and Shirley or any of those other things. I just wanted to watch hockey on television. Being a teenager, I had completely different interests than the rest of my family. But I think about that, and I think about the land that I grew up in, and we certainly got by without all of those gadgets. We had plenty of gadgets already. But today, you walk out of the house without your cell phone, and you're driving to work, and you're panicking because it's, whoa, I got to go back and get that thing. And you're looking at the clock on the dashboard, and you're saying, gee, do I have time to go back and get it? I'm more lost without a cell phone than if I were to leave my wallet behind, I think, in many cases. Because the cell phone is my alarm clock, it's my email, it's my telephone, it's all of those various things, it's calendar. So I've got all of that together. But here we go. The schools have become, just like everyone else, very reliant on broadband service. And without it, if you think about it, all of that, it's not just the communication that goes back and forth. And of course, in the classrooms, the fact that they use it for a lot of research and, it's a supplement to a teacher's curriculum. But if you think about the people who are paying for the bills, the vendors and the like, who all have to be paid by the business offices at these schools, that's usually just done now, zap across the internet. That'll all be gone. Unless they can figure out some way. Do they just suddenly appropriate $60 million and hand it to someone? Because you've got to find apparently the problem is with the original contract. So what do you do? What can you do legally? I think that's even a bigger question while you await perhaps a rebidding or a resubmission of contracts for this to happen. And this could be taking months and months and months to resolve. So there's a problem that I think that state legislators weren't looking for. And while I have a lot of respect for how they managed to keep government in this state small and generally unobtrusive in people's lives, sometimes mistakes get made, even by the best intentions. And sometimes they get made simply because people are in a hurry. And sometimes for nefarious reasons. I'm not saying it's the latter one. I'm just telling you this is a big, big headache. And come that a week from Monday morning in those schools, if they get to the office and people get to the classrooms, it is going to be like living in the dark ages because they're so used to having this around. 14 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Do want to point out 33 at our studios. And also, you can reach our program by dialing 736-0300. That is 736-0300. And I'm willing to take some of your telephone calls. You can also email me at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. That last name being spelled Colley, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. If only, though, broadband was the only trouble we had in our school systems. Story today in the Daily Caller. I saw this and I thought, here you go again. The politically correct trying to stymie efforts to educate young people about what our country really is, the history of our country, and some of the more important factors of it. The writer says, fancy pants, I guess that means they think they're a little bit better than everybody else, academics say high school civics tests are fraught with danger. Now, I'm a believer that if people are going to go vote in this country, they should be able to tell you at least who their local council person is, or they should be able to identify one U.S. senator and who their governor happens to be. And if you can't do those simple things, don't show up and vote. For crying out loud, if all you're doing is sitting around waiting for the government to send you another check, and that's your rationale for voting, then get out of the way. But apparently some academics at Tufts University are saying that this is all just rote memorization and doesn't really tell people what's true about their country. On the other hand, some of these tests are very similar to what immigrants take when they get nationalized or naturalized, nationalized, when they get naturalized as citizens. And they only have to get 6 of 10. You know what's funny is most of these people who get naturalized are so in love with this country that they can get all 10 and they could probably get 100 if they needed to. So we're not asking the children to do a whole heck of a lot. You know what I think is really going on here? I think these academics don't like the idea of people knowing a little bit about how their government runs and who's in their governments and a few important dates. When I was in high school, we had a teacher, and I would not say that she was in any way a traditionalist. I think she was fairly liberal. But she insisted that there were certain dates we absolutely had to know in history. When you've got kids today who think that the War of 1812 took place after World War II, we don't need any more dingbats walking around on the streets. And if you can't count simple numbers, so she would teach us numbers. She would teach us numbers like 622. Muhammad supposedly gets his revelation. She would teach us figures as well. 1592 or 1492. Excuse me. There goes a little bit of dementia kicking in this morning. 1492. Well, there's a reason you know that, for obvious reasons in Western history. 1914, 1917, 1918, 1941, 1945. All of these things play a huge role in our daily lives. I don't think academics at the college level like all of this going on because they want these empty-headed vessels coming in so they can fill those empty-headed vessels with all of their leftist wacko crap. Let's be honest about that. Because that's the goal, is to destroy the culture that was before so they can rebuild their socialist paradise. The writer says Tufts is, of course, most famous for showing up on a list of a dozen colleges which have attacked freedom of speech with the most impressive zeal. In other words, you can't say what you feel or believe because somebody might be offended. Also this fall, the semi-prestigious university announced plans to offer a course called Demystifying the Hipster. And here's the description. We will focus on film, fiction, fashion, and music produced in the last 20 years, connecting these contemporary examples to a longer history of the hipster that dates back to Norman Mailer's seminal 1957 essay, The White Negro, Superficial Reflections on the Hipster. That's the description for the one-credit course. And then you can also do some pottery and basket weaving, too. They'd really enjoy it if you partake in all of those things. I want to point out this morning, if I could, we have a new sponsor to our program, very fine sponsor. I've been telling you stories lately that people who are looking to make a little extra money can do so by working part-time as school bus drivers. And there's actually a big need for that. Western States Bus Services is hiring part-time bus drivers right now. Split shifts 5 days per week, summers off, and scheduled no school days. Pay is $10.75 per hour. You could apply today by contacting, and let me give you this number. I'll be reading this again later this show, so if you don't have a pen or pencil right now, get one handy so you'll have it then. But the number is 733-8003. That is 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer, and I think for a lot of people out there who have maybe little ones at home, and they can get them off to school and figure out a way to get someone else on the bus to drive. I said it's a great way for somebody in the farming lifestyle to have somebody stay and finish the chores in the morning while somebody else drives the bus and brings in a little extra income for the family. We've got more coming up. Ken Menzel will join us in about 15 minutes from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. And Kelton Hatch joining us in the next hour, taking your calls, your questions, right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio13.com with Bill Colley. Did I do that again? Newsradio1310.com. Ken Menzel is actually on the road, and he's here a little early today, so I said, why don't you grab a chair and we can actually sit down and have a conversation this morning related to a couple of things that obviously are going on around the state. But when he does drop by on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, he generally also comes by and talks about some people who are wanted by the Sheriff's Department, and we'd like to help pass that along because some of these people really should be answering, I guess, to somebody right at some point. But we want to point out 824, 33 degrees on our program right now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. And again, first of all, a couple of names, new names this week.
Yeah, new names this week. Jason Eugene Daniels. His date of birth is June 27th, 1990, which makes him about 24 years of age. He's 5'8", 140 pounds with brown hair and blue eyes. He's got a warrant for $20,000 for domestic battery. Jason's last whereabouts were known to be in the Jerome area. If anybody has information on how we can contact Jason, please contact us. The other one would be for Angelica Roque. The last name spelling for her is Roque. Her date of birth is 11/28 of 85, which makes her about 29 years old. She's 5 feet, 140 pounds, black hair and brown eyes. She's got a $2,500 warrant for possession of paraphernalia. If anybody knows where Miss Roque or Mr. Daniels is at, they're encouraged to contact us through CERCOM or dispatch center at 735-1911, or contact us at the sheriff's office 736-4000, and we can follow up on your information, which could possibly lead to you receiving a cash reward through Crime Stoppers.
Of course, it's usually when you do this too, it can be, how do you call it, confidential.
Absolutely. We work to really maintain, if you don't want that person who we will get to know who you are, and anonymity is a really big deal. We work hard to make sure that if you don't want your identity known, that it won't be.
Yeah, and big city police departments have been saying for years that that's a critical thing for them because there's always concern about intimidation.
Right.
And so if you can give someone that, that cloak, then they're more willing to come forward and do these things.
Yeah, you won't get those tips if you can't maintain some sort of anonymity, and with a warrant, it's pretty easily done.
We were talking during the break about this proposal that just popped up last week in the state legislature about concealed carry, and your office issues permits, but there's a discussion of eliminating the permit process altogether.
Yes.
And obviously, probably around the office, that's been a big topic of discussion.
It has been. The sheriff's office issues a number of permits every year, both enhanced permit and just a regular concealed weapons permit. And there is a strong benefit to that. To be issued those permits, especially the enhanced, it requires the person who gets that license to show some familiarity with the firearm. There's so many tragic accidents that happen. We can look just here in our own state at how many accidental shootings have occurred just recently, to realize that accidents do happen. Even amongst ourselves, accidents happen, and we get training on a regular basis. You often hear, I was talking with Doug Sugden, he's the staff sergeant in charge of issuing those concealed weapons permits, and he says that on a regular basis people come in and ask him questions about, somebody comes on my property, can I shoot them? Well, the answer would be no if all they've done is come onto your property. Carrying a gun is a huge liability, and I carry one every day, and should I be forced with the decision to have to protect myself or somebody else because the possible loss of life is imminent? Not only is there a big responsibility that comes with that, but I'm insured. If I were to pull that trigger through my department and through our insurance agency, there's a huge amount of insurance that comes with each of us carrying a firearm and having to take somebody's life.
This could end up in a civil lawsuit then if somebody didn't have a permit. It's not just criminal, but a big civil lawsuit.
Absolutely. Yes. And so those are things to really wonder. If you're going to carry a concealed weapon, do you have what it takes to be able to use that should you find yourself in a position where your life could be taken? Do you have it to be able to pull that trigger and take someone's life? A lot of people would say no, they don't. Even a lot of police officers, sometimes when forced with a decision and they make that decision, how many officers don't come back because it's affected them so detrimentally? Some do, many do. There's a lot that don't. That's a big thing to have to think about before you make the decision to carry. Do I have what it takes to do that?
Is law enforcement going to have some input in the discussion?
That's a question that I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know. Maybe on a higher level with some of the sheriffs and chiefs in Boise. I know that the Bannock County Sheriff has weighed in on the option in an article that was put out by the Idaho State Journal. In talking with Sheriff Carter, Tom is a very strong proponent of the right to bear arms. He believes in the Constitution and would not do anything that would take away from somebody's right to bear arms. But I also think that it's a good idea that you familiarize yourself with the weapon before you decide to do so. Is it legal to carry a firearm in a post office? Is it legal to carry a firearm in a government building?
See,
those are things that you don't know.
Right, concealed carry could still mean there's certain places you can't take that firearm, right?
Absolutely, and that's what these classes are designed to teach, is to help protect you so that you don't find yourself in a situation where, wow, I didn't know that.
Well, if you can stick around for a few more minutes, because we have a break coming up, but I think a couple of people might want to chime in on this one, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Because I know you got a busy schedule, but
right.
It's a quiet morning, we hope, so far.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Got more with Sergeant Ken Menzel coming up in just a few minutes. Save your telephone calls. He'll be willing to chat with you. He'll be with us until about 8:40 this morning. In the meantime, some messages from some of our fine sponsors are just ahead on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is Top Story with Bill Colley. Our guest in the studio at 8:34, Ken Menzel, Sergeant with the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department, and he was reflecting on concealed carry and, of course, the proposed law in Boise that would eliminate the permitting process. And we've been actually talking about training and really the need for people to be aware of firearms. And we're also willing for a few minutes to take some of your telephone calls if you have some thoughts on this topic. 736-0300, 34 at our studios on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The show is called Top Story. My name is Bill Colley. We have a caller with us, and our guest, Ken Menzel, is taking some of these calls right away. And you're on the air. What's on your mind?
I have a comment more than a question. I am a concealed carry holder, and I don't think it should be limited. And everybody keeps talking about just the training, and that's a given if you're taking the course. But I think even bigger and broader than that is a background check. I mean, at least you know somebody that's got a concealed carry permit is a lawful citizen. I mean, not somebody that's deranged or something.
I guess, Ken, you brought that up earlier.
Yes.
That mental illness is a serious concern that you have in this situation.
Not only mental illness, but individuals who've been convicted of felonies or even, for that matter, domestic violence. Individuals who have that type of criminal history or mental illness. Talking about the criminal history, whether you're a convicted felon or convicted of domestic violence, you're prohibited from carrying a firearm. The background check in and of itself right there eliminates individuals who suffer from those types of issues from being able to carry a concealed weapon. The mental illness, again, your caller brings up a very good point. You look at some of the shootings that we've had over the years, especially in schools. If these individuals would have been allowed to carry a concealed weapon because the law to have a permit to do so wasn't in effect, could have that issue been even worse?
We have another caller joining us at 8:36, and you're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX with our guest Ken Menzel and your question or comment.
Yeah, good morning. Your guy there took an oath to uphold the Constitution, yet he's sitting there advocating that we get a concealed weapon permit, infringing on the Second Amendment, in fact, breaking the law. So is this guy an officer of the law, or is he not?
Well, I'm not advocating that you shouldn't have your right to bear arms. That is something that I believe in. I believe in the Constitution strongly. Having a concealed weapons permit doesn't take away that right to bear arms. It shows, in my opinion, responsibility. It shows that you're willing to learn the laws of our nation. You're willing to learn the statutes of our state and even the ordinances of our county and understand when it's appropriate to carry a weapon, where you can carry a weapon. Is it prohibited to have a weapon in a government building? I think all around it reduces your liability of carrying a weapon and choosing to use that should circumstance dictate it need to be used.
So what you're advocating is saying that, what we need to do, especially when you reference you can't walk into a federal building because they've got screeners there. First of all, if you had it, you'd have to surrender it.
Sure.
And
charged.
Right. And so you're recommending that people at least be aware of these things beforehand.
Right. The biggest thing that I look at with this is just responsible gun ownership, responsible carry. I would never purport to say I don't believe you should be able to carry a firearm. I just believe in making it a responsible carry, not only for yourself as the person carrying the firearm, but for those around you. The citizens have an expectation of safety. You look at the professor in Pocatello at ISU who accidentally shot himself in the leg. Did the students in that classroom, how many students could have been injured in that scenario? Again, it just comes down to responsibility, not whether or not I want to see you be able to carry a gun or not.
We have another caller joining us, and you're up next on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, and your comment or question.
Well, yes, I just had wanted to weigh in on the concealed carry. I am a concealed carry permit holder. I have been for a dozen or more years. I'm also a hunter safety instructor with the Fish and Game Department. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I know that people, fellows come into the Fish and Game, sign up for a hunter safety class because they can get that piece of paper that says they've gone through a training program to acquire their their concealed carry permit. However, when I got my concealed carry permit, I found out that I actually knew more than the two fellows that were conducting the class.
Yeah.
And when I do a hunter safety program, I make sure that the kids, the students, whoever they may be, adult or youth, know what they should do if they should come across a firearm.
We've got a break coming up. Do you know what? If you're willing to stick around a few more minutes,
Absolutely.
okay, we'll just pick that up from there, because it seems to be rather a popular topic today. 20 minutes now from 9 o'clock. Top story. Sergeant Ken Menzel is our guest in studio, and we're talking a bit about this effort by some in the state legislature to remove the permitting process for concealed carry. The instructor brought up some good points, and maybe we'll talk about that too a little bit coming up following the break. 33 at 8:40. I don't know if the music's quite appropriate for the for this segment. Some people out there may feel that with the authority in the office that the music is probably not a good idea. This is all random. I loaded up all the music and it just comes up at random.
That's hilarious.
I was talking about my friend Doug Beatty on the air the other day, and of course he's the son of the actor Ned Beatty.
Right.
And he was emailing me during the show, and all of a sudden up came Dueling Banjos, which he said when he was a kid he heard that so often, and so many jokes about that squeal like a pig that he said he was sick of it. And I had to apologize to him and say, Doug, if you're listening to the show, that was random. Just came out of nowhere. Ken Menzel is our guest in the studio this morning. It's coming up on 8:45. We have 34 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we've been talking about concealed carry. And the debate right now at the state capitol is, do they remove the permitting process from that? We're going to get to a caller right now, then we're going to get back to what the instructor was talking about.
Yes.
In the last segment of the program. You're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX, in fact. What's on your mind?
Good morning, guys. Hope everyone's having a good morning.
Good morning.
I am a concealed weapons carrier. I do everything legally. I think everybody should respect the tools they're using and should have some training for the tools they're using. However, if someone is a felon, if someone has a history of mental illness, whatever, violence, they're going to know that. And so do you think they're going to go through your process of getting checked out? If they want a gun, they're going to get a gun, and they're going to carry a gun, whether or not the law says they can or not.
That is true. I mean, criminals have a way to find a firearm in those situations.
Absolutely right. And there's no debating that. If somebody wants to use a weapon, they're going to use a weapon. It's just another vetting process to make sure that individuals who do have a felonious background or issues with mental illness aren't given a carte blanche ability to just carry concealed. A lot of times when you see perpetrators of a crime doing something of this nature, it's very seldom you see somebody carry a concealed weapon. You know, if you look at a bank robbery or something like that, they hop out of the car, they go right in, the firearm's brandished. Again, it's just a vetting process, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, to hopefully encourage responsible gun ownership, responsible carry.
A friend of mine emailed me when I told him about this story the other day, and he lives out of state, but he emailed me and he said so the whole permitting process does make law enforcement's job easier.
I would say so, yes.
But my response to that was, I don't know anybody who went into law enforcement because they wanted an easy life.
Right. I remember you saying that. I was listening to your program.
And because most of my friends who did it because the adventure. I mean, there was a lot of adventure in the early days. Then they realized there was paperwork and all those other things that were involved, and it wasn't quite so glamorous, I guess, after the fact. But the instructor brought up a couple of points when he was on the air with us a few minutes ago that I know you wanted to address as well.
Yeah. It was interesting to listen to him describe as he teaches fish and game courses. It's obvious just in the little bit that we listened to him that he's got quite a bit of experience. The same scenario could hold place where you have several law enforcement officers going to a class where the instructor is a very new instructor and has very limited knowledge or experience in the subject matter that he's teaching other than a degree. And the students, therefore, could actually be more prolific and have a better depth of teaching in that field of study than the instructor would, just because the experience level. It would be my not knowing the situation of this instructor. The individuals teaching the course sounds like had less training than the instructor who took the course himself, which wouldn't be necessarily uncommon. I've got 15 years of experience in law enforcement.
There's a certain level, though, I mean, that your people have when they're doing this, right?
Yes. Oh, and trying to just make sure that there's a specific standard that's taught.
We have another couple of callers with us. Ken Menzel is our guest. He's in the studio with us up until 9 o'clock this morning. It's 8:34 at our studios right now. News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com allows you to listen to us anywhere around the world. And you're up next with Sergeant Menzel.
Good morning. I caught the point that the sergeant made about, some instructors leading a course with the supposed students who have more experience and probably even could be better marksmen with the firearms.
Yes.
I find that interesting as compared to the view that maybe people are better marksmen, they're safer marksmen if they do have a permit. And and also what goes along with that is a question in my mind is if a person is licensed to carry, I think that lasts 5 years now?
Something like that,
right?
Yes.
So what if that lapses and they don't renew that license? Some people call it a permit or concealed carry weapons permit, but it is a form of licensing. Does that, the contradiction I hear, I don't know if anybody else does, you're saying that, maybe the instructor is not the best person there to be teaching the course. So my question is, if somebody has had a permit or not even a permit, couldn't that person be just as safe as the person who's licensed, theoretically?
Can we mention, Ken, that not every department has a guy like Chris Kyle available that they could hire, who's had been one of the world's best, and that is world's best.
Sure.
You've got people, though, as you pointed out, they meet the requirements, and every once in a while someone will come into that course who might have been a sniper in the military or has that extensive background too. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't diminish your people in that sense.
No, and I'm not sure where the caller who was an instructor for firearms that teaches through Fish and Game, I'm not sure where he got his concealed weapons permit. With Twin Falls County, that's not a class that we, the county, teach. That's something that as somebody gets their concealed weapons permit, they just have to show that they've taken a course. So we, at this point, at the sheriff's office, don't control the training that's received when somebody gets that permit. We just ensure that training has been received.
Certainly, though, the people who are teaching your courses have some experience in this. They had to have some experience just to become a deputy.
Yes. Through the Twin Falls Sheriff's Office, yes, our firearms instructors who teach the deputies how to maintain and use a firearm, the experience level at the Sheriff's Office is very high. We have some amazing firearms instructors with the Sheriff's Office. I would dare say I would put them in their experience and their training against almost anybody. And so the level of skill and the level of instruction that takes place amongst our deputies is pretty high. It's not those instructors, though, that teach the people who are applying for the concealed weapons permit through Twin Falls County. Mm-hmm. The instruction that people seek in Twin Falls County comes through private resources, through a private person.
But again, most people, probably 90% of them coming into the course, don't have as much experience as the people teaching it.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Some have none as they're coming in, and
that's correct.
They need to start somewhere. We have another caller with us. I hope the caller is patient and still with us online at 8:52. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Good morning, and what's on your mind?
Thank you. I'd like to ask your guest. Now you mentioned, you say somebody with I think the term you used was felonious background. However, I'll preface this to say, I graduated from the University of Idaho College of Law. I never took the bar, and I don't practice law. I practice farming. But I read the statute on when felons are discharged from parole or they've topped out and are discharged from the correction system. I read the statute that says that all their civil rights are restored, except in certain cases of violence, crimes, or or domestic or drug crimes, they no longer have the right to bear arms. But once somebody in a nonviolent crime felony has been discharged from parole, they have the same rights as any other citizen. Is that correct?
I believe you're right. And in addressing that issue, that was the issue that I wanted. The point I was trying to make with that is, if you're a prohibited felon, then I don't think you should be able to carry a concealed weapon. If you're not a prohibited felon, let's say that you've topped out, you've had all your rights restored, and you desire to carry a concealed weapon, and you go through that permitting process, I don't see anything that should prohibit you from doing that.
Want to thank him for the call. We have another caller joining us. You're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX, on Top Story as well, with Bill Colley and my guest, Sergeant Ken Menzel. Good morning. What's on your mind?
Hi. I wanted to talk a little bit about the mental illness issue.
Yes.
When the officer is talking about that they could not carry permit with mental illness, I wonder how far back that goes. I've worked in school districts and with emotionally disturbed kids, and there's a lot of them.
There are.
And I wonder, as the history goes on, if they are going to be deemed as mentally ill. Also, you talk about PTSD. Chris Kyle claimed that he had PTSD, but so did his killer.
Yes.
And she brings up a point. My sister teaches those type of students, and a lot of them actually do hunt, though, in their spare time and the like. But we have labeled so many things mental illnesses anymore and feed so many people so many drugs. The definition of mental illness has only gotten larger, and I don't know. Some people are a little nervous, I think, about that somebody out there is going to, if they don't like them, is just simply going to say they're mentally ill and
Right.
deny them that permit.
And therein we start to hit the slippery slope. At what point do we start saying, as a nation, as a country, as a people, we as a holistic group believe that certain individuals can carry and certain individuals can't carry. And laws are put into effect based on what people want, and then we as law enforcement officers are expected to carry out those laws. I guess it boils down to, what are we as a nation willing to put up with, or how far do we expect law enforcement officers to make sure that nobody else infringes upon our rights? Really, I think that's what it boils down to for everybody, is nobody wants their rights infringed upon. And when our personal rights are infringed upon, we expect law enforcement to step in and take care of that problem. But what's good for one isn't necessarily good for another. And it could be, whether we're talking about concealed weapons or carrying firearms or any other law that's out there, whether it be driving drunk or having an open container in your vehicle, or there's a whole gamut of things that prohibit people from doing certain things, having a driver's license. What are we willing to put up with, and ultimately what keeps us as a people safe?
We didn't get to talk about this on the air, but during one of the breaks, I was pointing out to the sergeant that I had a big old Belgian Shepherd that was probably the best home defense
Right.
that I could ever find. And I think, of course, we have dangerous dog ordinances in some places too, but sometimes there are other ways, at least when you're at home, to defend your property. And if you have a loud dog,
That's definitely one of them. Yeah.
and you don't have to worry about a lot of the, other penalties you might incur with that loud dog, as long as that dog isn't up chasing people up and down the street.
Right.
So
Yes.
there's a solution for some people if you're looking just for that home defense.
Right.
And since I love having dogs around, to me that sometimes is a much better idea. And you don't have to worry about that dog getting you, as long as it's leashed, into some sort of civil penalty around the neighborhood.
Right. I appreciate the phone calls this morning. I hope that we've been able to give some answers that, we're not going to please everybody. We talked about how law enforcement officers, when we take the job, when we come to work, we know that there's a certain amount of risk that's inherent with being a police officer. By the same token, I don't believe that when I come to work, somebody has the right to take my rights away from me, to resist whatever it is we're doing. That's what we have a court system for. Just like a school teacher, when they have a child that acts out and throws a fit and starts scratching and kicking and biting, that school teacher didn't come to work that day expecting that child to behave in such a way that battered that school teacher. Yes, we have the training and we have the skills to try and help us do the job that we do. Really what it's about for us as law enforcement officers is to try and resolve things in such a way that's as peaceful, with a limited use of force as possible, to take care of the law, to make sure that people's rights aren't infringed upon.
Going home and having your dinner and watching a little TV like everybody else is enjoyable.
Exactly.
And you'd like to get there without a lot of interference.
That's right.
Yeah. That's why it's always a good idea to say yes, sir, and no, sir, or yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, in a lot of these situations. It certainly does help.
It does, yes. Respect from both sides is definitely big.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for coming by today. You didn't expect
Bill.
this to be a 40-minute visit.
Right.
I think you can put in for some overtime.
There you go.
Yes. All right. Sergeant Ken Menzel joining us this morning from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department. Speaking of law enforcement of a different nature coming up, nature being the key there. Kelton Hatch going to be joining us from the Idaho Fish and Game. In fact, he'll be taking some of your telephone calls too as well in the next hour. Want to point out we have a guest in the studio with us again. Speaking of the dangers, I guess, of being in law enforcement, Kelton Hatch is joining us from Idaho Fish and Game this morning. And first of all, I noticed you're in a sling.
I am. Rotator cuff.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, just, that's what happens when you get hit by bigger vehicles than the one you're driving.
That'll do it. Well, you're walking around still. That's a good sign.
Yep. So I'm pretty tickled about that.
Hey, right off the top, I just want to mention to folks, if they're just tuning in, you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is Top Story with Bill Colley. Want to thank our last guest, Ken Menzel, for sticking around and talking about concealed carry. But we have a whole another list of issues we're going to be bringing up here in this hour of the program. Kelton comes by only on a monthly basis and chats with us. Can I, right off the top, though, first, when you were here last, we were talking about the need, or we were going to see some fee increases, because there's been so much more your office has had to do. And yet, a couple of weeks ago, I read on the AP wire that there's already people grumbling in Boise about potentially increasing licensing fees and the like.
Yeah, and it's always it's really interesting because we seem to get a really good support from a lot of our sportsmen, but then the legislatures hear from other sportsmen, and it usually doesn't come through. Our funding's a lot different, and I don't know whether you have ever seen how our funding comes. We're a dedicated fund agency, so we get no general tax dollars whatsoever. The only funding that we get is from our from federal excise taxes on fishing equipment and hunting equipment and ammunition, and then the sales of hunting and fishing licenses. So we really rely on these fee increases to help keep up with inflation. And I don't know, it'll be interesting. We cut positions last year, and if things don't come through, we may end up having to do that again this year.
And the thing is, we don't have as many people any longer who are really involved in a lot of younger kids. Mom and dad never took them out hunting, so they don't grow up and develop that as either a hobby or as a sport, and so you lose that revenue.
You really do, because I know we have a program that's called Trout in the Classroom, and what we do is we take fish eggs in, and the teachers incubate them and hatch them and raise the fish, and then we try to take all these kids fishing. We take about 2,300 kids in the Magic Valley fishing, sixth graders typically, each spring. Out of that group, I'd be willing to bet, kids from Robert Stewart, kids from O'Leary, and things like that, less than 50% of them have ever had a fishing pole in their hand, and they're 12, 13 years old. And that kind of blows me away. Living in Idaho, I've got some schools that are as low as 10 to 15% of the kids are the only ones that have ever been fishing. And so, yeah, we're definitely seeing a loss of people, or losing that younger group getting into the outdoors.
Is there a solution to that? I know that there are a lot of programs even schools are trying to develop and to get people more interested, and you've got a lot of the actual sportsmen's clubs that are trying to find ways to encourage children to take a greater interest.
You bet, and we push those. We have youth hunting clinics, pheasant hunting, waterfowl hunting, these fishing programs. We actually have a fish trailer that we take to all the area ponds. We have 14 events planned for this summer that we just show up with a trailer that people can show up at that trailer and fish for free that day. If they're fishing with us, they just sign in. They don't have to buy a fishing license. We have 150 fishing poles in the trailer, night crawlers, everything they need, and people to instruct them on how to fish, and it's been a huge success. I mean, a lot of times we'll go to Durkee's, we'll have 150 people show up. And a lot of times it's women with their little children, their stay-at-home moms, or women that'll take the day off to take their kids fishing because their husbands are golfers or don't want to get out and fish, and they want to introduce their children to something that they grew up with. And so it's not just necessarily that we've lost that portion of the youth, but we've lost that a lot of the generation of parents. And so we've got a lot of that are having these younger kids, and so we've got a lot of clinics based around skills to help teach them how to get their kids in the outdoors. And so hopefully we can get people to. I mean, I love Idaho. I've been here all my entire life, and hunting and fishing is one of the main reasons that keeps me here, because we've just got so much of it. And so hopefully we can get other people out there enjoying the outdoors.
Yeah, it's really still, I think, among those last frontiers that we have.
It's phenomenal. Just the opportunities we have. We got the high alpines to the north, and you got the canyons and deserts to the south, and you've got it all here in the Magic Valley.
I've gotten you way off track, of course.
Oh, no, that's fine. I love talking about anything to do with hunting and fishing. So
12 minutes after 9 o'clock, Kelton Hatch is our guest from Idaho Fish and Game 34 at our studios. This is Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Also anywhere on the World Wide Web, if they still call it that. I'm dating myself. Newsradio1310.com. And we've got a telephone call already, if you don't mind. The number, if you'd like to reach Kelton while he's in studio with us this morning, is 736-0300. That is 736-0300. And you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's up with you?
Good morning, Kelton. I've got a question. We've been here in Idaho for about 10 years, and if I remember right, there used to be 3 elk ranches within a reasonable distance, and I don't see them anymore. What happened?
Well,
I'll just take your answer on the air. Thank you.
You know, we still have a few of those elk ranches going on. Most of those are managed by the Department of Ag. We don't really have a lot to do with the elk ranches anymore. That was turned over to them several years ago. It's just an economic thing. There's some of them that are still going on, and people that have a market for their meat or have a place to sell their larger bulls are doing okay. But a lot of people jumped into elk ranching, and it wasn't quite as lucrative as they were thinking it would be at first, and so it's just a deal of supply and demand.
We have another caller joining us, and you're up next on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX with our guest, Kelton Hatch. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yep, sure, you're on the air.
Hey, I got a question about the fishing around here. Seems like there's a whole bunch of different regulations as far as fly fishing only, and you can only use certain kind of hooks and stuff like that. Is there a simpler way you guys can simplify it for people so they don't think that they're out fishing, they're going to get a ticket?
I love your question because we just had a big sit-down meeting on this the other day. I was talking with Doug McGargle, our regional fisheries manager, and right now, if you grab the regulations and on the front page it says Magic Valley, any of those bodies of water that are listed on there are general fishing waters, and so you can go over there and fish with fly pole, spinning rod, anything but dynamite and electricity pretty much. And so, I mean, those are the general fishing areas, 6 fish limits and things like that. If they're not listed there, you turn into the back pages, and then those have the special regs. Most of our special regs, it is just a lot more people, certain fish are struggling, and so that's why our regs are the way they are. But we are right now going into a rules season for fishing, and so on February 24th we'll be in Haley, the 25th we'll be in Burley, and on the 26th of February we're going to be in Magic Valley. And we want to speak to sportsmen like you that have some ideas on changes you'd like to see in our fishing regs for the coming years, for the next 2 years, as well as on into the future. So please spin in and talk to us about that. And we are working towards making things simpler for folks.
We're going to get to our caller. Hold on just a minute, caller. We've got your call, and just be patient for a second. Just review those dates and locations again for people.
Okay. These dates are for 2 meetings. What we're having is we're going to talk a little bit more about big game season setting, but these are our big game season setting and fisheries scoping meetings. And so on February 24th, we're going to be at the Haley Community Campus. We're going to start at 7 o'clock, and then we'll give a presentation there. On the 25th, we're going to be at the Burley Inn in the Minidoka Room. On the 25th, starting again at 7, same presentation. And on the 26th, we'll be at the Magic Valley Regional Office. And if you don't know what that is, it's 2.5 miles north of the Flying J on Highway 93. But come in. We're going to have staff on hand to talk to, as well as our presentations on our upcoming big game seasons. And then we're also scoping folks on what rules or opportunities they'd like to see change or added for fisheries. So it's going to be big meetings, so come over and join in and help plan the future of hunting and fishing.
All right. We've got another caller with us, and I thank you very much for your patience. It's 9:17, and you're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my history and kind of go along with the last caller. I grew up in Idaho in the 50s and early 60s. I fished then. I left Idaho. I was gone for about 40 years. When I moved back to Idaho, the fishing rules had totally changed. It used to be you could catch all you wanted, no problem. Any kind of fish you wanted, no problem. And then now that I moved back here, you're limited in a lot of streams only to 2 fish, or a lot of places you got to catch and release. You can't keep any fish. That totally ruins the fun of fishing.
And I concur with you. I definitely understand where you're coming from on that. Those rules, we're not trying to put them in to be a detriment. Our goal is to preserve, protect, and perpetuate all wildlife in Idaho. And if there's a rule, the biggest thing that we've ran into that has caused issues in the Magic Valley is cutthroat trout. And cutthroat trout were nearly listed as an endangered species. So we've been working really hard to preserve those fish because we don't want those areas completely closed down. And so that's where those rules and regs have come in. And a lot of it has just been from the number of people. I mean, I'm not quite as old as you, but in the 60s and 70s when I was fishing and stuff like that, I remember catching stringers of 6 cutthroat trout. Well, you just don't find cutties like that anymore in Idaho. We've had the population has more than doubled. When I graduated from high school, we had 780,000 people in Idaho. Now we're sitting at 1.8 million. 1,800,000, I guess it is. So it is just growing, and so because of that, we've had to change some of the regulations. But I plead with you again, please come to our public meetings. We'd love to sit down and talk to you to get some ideas on paper on what you would like to see changed and how we could make it better to make it more enjoyable for yourself.
Want to thank him for the call, and we've got more with Kelton Hatch coming up in just a couple of minutes on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And, of course, your telephone calls, too, if we can squeeze them in. In the meantime, though, we've got some messages from some of our fine sponsors just ahead. Coming up on 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, 30, well, I need better bifocals, 36 I'll call it. Just before we return to our guest, Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game, I just wanted to mention, we've been talking about this all week, and I think that people who are looking perhaps for a secondary income for their family would have an interest in this. Western States Bus Services is hiring part-time bus drivers right now. Split shifts, 5 days per week, summers off, of course, and scheduled no school days. Pay is $10.75 per hour. You can apply today by contacting, and I've got a telephone number here, and I asked people earlier if you've got a pen or pencil, grab that. That number is 733-8003. That is 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. Kelton, I know you came in with a long list of things you wanted to mention too. Before we get back to the callers, you have a big game topic that you wanted to address.
Well, I did, and I want to just kind of highlight some of the things that we're looking at doing this year. Every year we have big game season setting. After we have hunting seasons, we look at our harvest success, and then we try to look at things that we need to tweak to manage the wildlife. Some of the things that we're looking at this year, you can go to the Fish and Game website at fishandgame.idaho.gov, and you can click on the reports that are out there right now for the proposals. I'm just going to touch on a couple of them quick that people may be interested in. We're looking at putting in a new archery mule deer hunt in Unit 44. Archers should be pretty stoked about this. This hasn't been around forever, and so it's just a new opportunity up in there. We're looking at scoping that. We're also looking at changing the mule deer muzzleloader season. We have a rotating muzzleloader season, and we're headed back to Unit 45 with that, so people can come and comment on that. Probably the biggest changes, though, elk numbers have been really increasing in the last few years. We're actually looking at increasing cow tags across the region by 921 tags, which is almost 1,000 tags, and then we've got another 127 controlled elk hunt, bull elk hunt tags that we're looking at implementing. So come over, look at our paperwork on that, and see whether you like it. Give us some comments on it. And then for pronghorn, we're looking at increasing our either sex tags by 70 and our doe fawn tags by 135. And so the last few years, we've just had incredible winters, good springs. We've had high fawn survival. Numbers are really increasing, and so we're trying to pass some of that savings on to, I guess, those added animals onto the sportsmen. But hit those big game meetings and come and talk to us.
I wanted to point out our guest is Kelton Hatch. He's here from Idaho Fish and Game. He does this with us once a month. 9:36 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, anywhere on the web. And if you'd like a comment or question for our guest, you can give us a telephone call, 736-0300, 736-0300. And you can also shoot me an email if you don't have a phone nearby, and I may pass along any questions that would come in. And that is bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, and the last name is spelled Colley, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And I believe we have a caller joining us. A lot of questions today for you.
It's awesome.
We've got to mention, of course, you're on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Good morning.
Good morning. I was wondering, I have a daughter that's 6 and a daughter that's 4, and I'm wanting to get them fishing this summer. We just moved here recently, and I'm trying to find out where's some good places to take them fishing where the chance of them catching a fish is pretty good, and just to get them kind of involved in the fishing season.
Well, what I would probably do, sir, is I'd run them over to the Filer Kids ponds. There's some ponds just north of Filer, near the canyon. Great fishing opportunities over there. It's not the most beautiful place in the world, that scenic, but we stock it quite heavily and often, and so there's opportunity there. Durkee's Lake can be very good down by Shoshone Falls, especially in the summer. The bluegill will really start turning on, and so bluegill are a great kids fish because there's not a limit on the number you can catch, and you get lots of bites during the spawn. Another good place is Bluegill Lake. It's down in the canyon. Has been really good. And the last place I'd probably say is the Riley Ponds down at Hagerman. We've got Oster 1 through 5, and then we've got the Riley Ponds, and we stock those really heavy. They're pretty, that you can take your daughters for a walk, have a picnic, and catch fish.
Do they have restrictions on lures or?
None of those ponds do. Nope.
Whatever bait you want to use.
Whatever bait you want to use, you it's you can use spinners, bait, fly, night crawlers, live bait, artificial baits, whatever you want. Those are family-friendly fishing waters. We kind of mark them as, and we stock them heavy. And that's our goal. Is there are urban fisheries, and we just try to get folks into them and let them have some fun.
Want to thank him for the telephone call. In the next segment of the show, we've got to talk about a really serious issue, and that is poaching and situation that actually happened within the Twin Falls city limits, and disturbing. And I think that people should be made aware that this is going on probably much more frequently than we all realize. Kelton Hatch is our guest. He's going to be with us in the next half hour from Idaho Fish and Game. 36 at our studios. It's 9:30. Thank you for joining me, Bill Colley, this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. This is Top Story. Our guest in the studio this hour is Kelton Hatch with the Idaho Fish and Game Department, and he joins us on a Thursday morning, about once a month or so. And in a few minutes, he'll take some more of your telephone calls. Be patient. But in the meantime, we wanted to address an issue that cropped up in the last couple of weeks, and it's really... It's sad. I think it's dangerous, and I think that people. It'd be nice if someone had some details and could come forward more often when these things happen. 1310 KLIX News Radio 1310.com. This is Top Story with Bill Colley, and we're talking about the poaching of this mule deer within the city limits. And I guess that I saw on a website. I think it was KMVT's website, a photograph, but they took it from a distance because it was a pretty gruesome picture. And they just posted it from a distance where something like this had happened. But at the moment, I would take it that somebody out there is on a wanted list, a naughty list right now, at least for sure.
Well, yeah, and we want to thank the public for the outcry which has came from this most recent case. I guess the thing is there's not a lot I can say about the current case going on because we're still under investigation. Things are going very well with it. Right now, they served a search warrant yesterday, and we think we're really close to closing this. And that's about all I'd probably better say about the ongoing case. But just to let people know, this is just one of multiple cases. This deer was just better known than a lot of them. But we had so many phone calls on this with people with information, and one of our officers said they'd interviewed over 50 people on this one case. But we've got multiple other cases that are open, and people that have an interest in wildlife or love wildlife, if you see something fishy going on, give us a call at the regional office at 324-4359, or you can just type in CAP on your CAP hotline on your smartphone or whatever, and it'll pull up a 1-800 number for you. And you can remain completely anonymous. But this is... I guess I try to tell people we've got about 9-10 officers in the Magic Valley. The Magic Valley region goes from American Falls Dam to Mountain Home to Galena Summit and to the Nevada border. And we've got 9 patrollers out there doing all of this. And so the most of the information we get is from the general public. And so please be willing to come forward and stand up for your wildlife.
We've had a debate on the show in the last few weeks, too, about some people may do something like this because maybe they're desperate and they feel they need the venison. But on the other hand, you got people out there who are just looking for trophies sometimes.
Yeah, well, you see, and I understand the food angle on this, but I'm sorry, with all the programs that are in place right now to help people in need, the food banks and soup kitchens and all of these other things, it costs you more to go out and shoot a deer and process it, even without permits, because, I mean, you need a truck, you need a rifle, you need ammunition, you got to go somewhere and do it. And, I mean, there's a dozen places in town that will help people get by until they get a better paying job to be able to, hunting, we utilize all the meat in hunting ourselves, but there's such a market in big antlers right now. I mean, I'm headed to a sports show next week to talk to non-resident sportsmen. We'll have mule deer tags for trophy mule deer at this auction for other states that will sell in the upwards range of $250,000 for one permit for somebody to go hunt a trophy mule deer. Elk tags will sell in that $180,000 range. Bighorn sheep I've seen sell for anywhere from $80,000 to $400,000 for a bighorn sheep tag. And a lot of people, I hate seeing, the commercialization of wildlife. However, this money is used for wildlife management research and for the betterment of wildlife. But that's the kind of market value these big animals have on them. And so usually when a big animal's killed, it's a financial or a boasting deal that they're harvesting it for. It's not for the meat, because big bucks just aren't that good to eat.
and boasting, by the way, is usually what leads someone back to them.
Yeah, it leads us to them.
Yeah, and then it's not so much fun after that. Yeah. After that happens. Look, we've got a little bit more to talk about. We're coming up on a break shortly, but in the next segment too, if you still have a question or comment for our guest, Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game, he will be in the studio with us right up until the Mike Huckabee Report. And we should note that you have an opportunity to bounce a question by him, but he's got a couple of other things to talk about too as well.
I really wanted to throw this out here quick because this is another important deal. We've had a goose closure, and what the goose closure is, it wasn't allowing people to hunt geese around the Hagerman area for about the last 30 years. The reason that was put into place is because we didn't have a lot of geese in the Magic Valley, and so those geese we were trying to make a safety zone for them so that they'd have a place to go. Then they'd come out to the fields and people could hunt them, and they just wouldn't get blown out of the area. Well, guess what? We're raising a lot more corn nowadays. Geese populations are up, and we've got a lot of geese out there. So we're having a meeting on this, removing this closure to allow people to be able to hunt on the 16th at the Snake River Grill. Stop by, give us your comments if you want to see that changed.
All right, and that's going to be a Monday, right?
That's on Monday.
All right,
President's Day, that evening from 5 to 7.
More with Kelton Hatch coming up in just a couple of minutes on Top Story. It's 37, 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have a guest in the studio with us this morning during the course of this hour of the program. It's coming up on 9:44. Kelton Hatch joins us on a monthly basis from Idaho Fish and Game. 38. We're going through a quick warm-up this morning, and I know some people have had some comments or questions for him as well while he's in the studio with us on Top Story. This is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you behind the microphone. And the telephone number, if you'd like to reach our guest, is 736-0300. That is 736-0300. One thing I can say, Kelton, is that your department does do a good job when it comes to informing the public with all of the different meetings. And as you told the caller earlier, come and give us some input.
Well, yeah, that's one of my most frustrating things. I understand that people are really busy, but when you love something and you enjoy it and it's part of your life, the hunting and fishing, be involved in how it's managed and planned. I do a lot of presentations, and I try to talk to youth groups and school kids and Rotaries and Kiwanis and all those. And my big message to them is come and tell us what you want. We're public servants. We want to know what you want, and we will definitely we know the numbers where we need to be with the deer, the elk, the antelope. We count those. We have those through. But we also like to hear stuff on what people are seeing when they're out there hunting, where they're seeing deer move and things. We got a lot of, we got several hundred radio collars on animals tracking and following them. But, anything that we can get from the general public really helps us.
We have a caller with us, and I think the caller has been patiently waiting. You're on the air, and you're on the air with Kelton Hatch. Good morning.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a little bit off of the subject, but on the subject. I know that just target shooting, et cetera, is not regulated by Fish and Game. But areas where this takes place, and I'm specifically referring to the area north of the Canyon Rim, the Devil's Corral, Durkee's Lake, or not Durkee's Lake, Vineyard Lake area from the Hanson Bridge to the Prime Bridge. I grew up in the area, and I'm 64 years old now. I drove through there the other day, and people indiscriminately shooting anywhere, and I am a sportsman. I shoot. People indiscriminately driving everywhere, leaving trash, garbage, etc. everywhere. These are our, quote, so-called sportsmen out sighting in their guns to go shoot rock chucks, target practice, etc. I know it's not Fish and Game, but Fish and Game and BLM, Twin Falls County, Jerome County need to regulate that area. Even though we all don't want regulations, but somebody's going to get shot. Something is going to get shot, whatever.
Kelton, he brings up a point. When I was at Canyon Park last Saturday, I walked by one of the picnic tables, and of course all of the McDonald's cups were still sitting on them. It's just, no one around. Just 15 feet away is a trash barrel.
It's just a sign of society nowadays. I don't know. I guess it was in the 60s and 70s where they had the Crying Indian, because it Keep America Beautiful. I wish we'd bring back it. That was one of the most successful campaigns there had ever been. I echo this gentleman's feelings. We have the same issue in the mouth of Indian Springs and multiple other canyons, and people just, I don't know, it's so frustrating because I've got a hunter ed instructor that goes out and part of his hunter ed things, they load up pickups their last day of their shooting of everybody else's garbage that's left crap out there shooting. And they've hauled several tons of stuff of other people shooting garbage off. And I mean, that's terrible when we expect somebody else to clean up our mess. And so, sir, I don't know how to do this. I know that BLM, my fear is that they're going to completely close all those areas completely off to shooting. Some of them need to be closed off just because of safety reasons and the number of people that are using the area. But, it's something that we need to teach our children, and we need to stand up to our friends and say, hey, I was out rabbit hunting. I can still remember this group of kids I went out rabbit hunting with when I was younger, and they got out of their trucks, and we opened our 22 shells, and they started throwing their boxes on the ground. And I walked around, and I picked all of it up, making sure that they saw me pick it up, and I threw it in the car. They never invited me to go back with them. I mean, I enjoyed shooting rabbits and stuff, but it's sitting there going, oh, he should just, he just wants to clean everything up and make, well, why would you be a pig? And it is a black eye to sportsmen when people leave their junk, their targets, and even if it's not a hunter that's out there shooting, I mean, it's just a target shooter, it's still a black eye to sportsmen.
Mike Huckabee is coming up in just a moment. The Huckabee Report is brought to you by, exclusively, we should point out, the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. Kelton, before we wrap up quickly, for people who would like to know a little bit more, is there a website where they could go to find most of the things you've been talking about, the schedules?
Everything that we've got here, there's a couple things you can do. You can go to Fish and Game Region 4 on Facebook. And if you're a Facebooker, we also have Twitter that we send out information on, so you can get on our Twitter feeds whenever we have public meetings or any of this type of stuff, or Facebook, or you can go to fishandgame.idaho.gov, and usually on the front page we will have all these topics that I've been talking about. All these public meetings are on there. You can go to the news releases. They're all on there. And so just go on there and you can get your information. If that fails, call me at the regional office, 324-4359.
All right. See you in a few weeks.
Hey, thanks.
And once again, the Huckabee Report is brought to you by, exclusively, the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. And the telephone number there is 736-6563. Got just a couple of minutes to wrap up before we say goodbye today. And I was just telling Kelton Hatch before he left the studio a quick story. I may get to it tomorrow, and we may be able to talk about it a little bit more at length because it got missed. Really, sometimes a big story happens at an event, and unfortunately, there are 2 or 3 things that go on at that event, and the other things get overlooked. Somebody this morning sent me a 28-minute video. It's at our Facebook page today at KLIX. If you can go to News Radio 1310 KLIX, our Facebook page, I have posted a 28-minute speech made by Darrell Waltrip. Many of you know him from, of course, his days racing and now actually being a color commentator for NASCAR. But he was the keynote speaker. The story got obliterated, though, because of what the president happened to say at that very National Prayer Breakfast 1 week ago today. And it's unfortunate because Waltrip's 28-minute speech, I watched it twice now, is one of the most moving things about his personal experience and how it brought him to God that I've ever seen in my life. So I'm recommending today, if you get an opportunity, go to that Facebook page and check. There's a link to it. I've posted it at News Radio 1310 KLIX on Facebook. But also as well, if you just do a search for Darrell Waltrip, and you do that on the computer, and then you hit video, it should come up, and it should be really close to the top. But he told a story about his relationship with some of the other drivers, especially one who we lost about 15 years ago at Daytona, coming up here on an anniversary of that, and Dale Earnhardt Sr. And he told the story about Dale Earnhardt Sr. and their relationship, being rivals and not always friendly on the track, but also off the track, how they came closer, each one of them closer to God, and how right up until the day he died, he mentions that his opponent, but his friend as well, kept a prayer card on the dashboard while he was racing, and had been there for years, since Neil Bonnet had been killed in a practice lap. And you've got to take an opportunity to see this if you really need someone to remind you about what's important in life. So I wanted to stress that this morning. We didn't get a chance earlier to mention it. As I say, if I get an opportunity, we may be even able to share some of that tomorrow or the beginning of next week, if you're tuning into the program. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and this is Top Story. And God willing, and the creek don't rise, of course, I get to do this all over again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, which I look forward to on a daily basis. Most people, how shall I put this, have a rather unusual relationship with their jobs. A lot of people, I have a friend who was telling me the other day, she's in nursing and she works in a nursing home, and she was telling me the other day, she just is at that point where she no longer wants to go to work after 40 years on the job. And yet still has a long ways to go until retirement, so it's almost a forced march to get to work every day. I have other friends who go to their jobs and they don't dislike their jobs, but they are a little indifferent when they go to their jobs. And then you've got people like me who can't wait to get up in the morning and actually get to the office 2 hours earlier than they're supposed to be there just so they can get the day started. There's nothing quite in the world like having this job and being able to spend a couple of hours every day with all of you. In the meantime, Rush Limbaugh will be up next following news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Sean Hannity following the news at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Oh, and of course, we always like to mention this, Glenn Beck following news at 4 o'clock today. Stay safe out there. Have a great and wonderful time. And I was going to say be nice to each other, but I'm really not the person to give that advice, am I?